Nguyen, and I'm a current second year at the Buffalo State University Art Conservation Program. And I'm here today with my co-liaison, Paige.
Yeah, hi, I'm Paige Bailey. I'm in my final year of my master's program at the University of Rhode Island.
And we're both liaisons for the Textile Specialty Group Emerging Conservators Professionals Network. And today we wanted to kind of share the resources for textile conservation that we found helpful as students and emerging professionals. And we hope that it's going to be helpful for you as well. Okay, first and foremost, we want to highlight the AIC Textiles Specialty Group Textile Conservation Wiki. This is a work in progress, but there's a lot of resources so far that we found really helpful, especially when it comes to exhibition of textiles, treatment of textiles, and then storage, which is something that emerging professionals and pre-program students have to work with as in their internships. And so we think that this is the first stop for resources, and hopefully you find it as helpful for you. And in addition to the Textile Wiki page, they also have an accompanying textile YouTube page that you can access through this link. And I find this really helpful because as conservators, sometimes we are visual learners, and hearing and seeing what other textile conservators are working on is really helpful. Maybe it'll get you interested in textiles if you haven't been exposed to textile conservation before, or if you have similar projects that you need some inspiration for. I think this is a really good page to go through, and as you can see, they have an extensive list of videos, and they're all ranging from different conservators at different levels, as well as museums and collections. So I think this is a really good resource to know and to access. And my next one is the Textile 101 resource at the Textile Museum for George Washington University. And I think this is really helpful because they provide very foundational information about fibers, colors, weave structures, and decorations. And I think this is really good for emerging conservators who are starting to familiarize themselves with the different aspects of textiles. It's not all linear. There are different weave structures and fibers that are used throughout, different cultures and collections. So I think this is a really good place to start once you have an idea of what you want to look for. So say, for instance, you want to learn about fiber. They have different aspects of fiber, as well as how they are produced, from natural to bark. And then we have polyester, so synthetic fibers that are more present in contemporary collections. I think this is a really good resource to look into once you're trying to build a foundational knowledge on fiber and other materials in textile conservation. And then the next one is a broader resource. This is the Canadian Conservation Institute website, and they have a lot of information. I use this mostly for learning about different materials. So in textiles, you're not always going to work with just fabric and yarns and all the fibers that we just saw. I think you might have some composite materials. You might have some questions about preventive conservation that isn't always covered in other resources. And I think this is a good place to start. They have a lot of PDFs that you can save, so it's not just this website that you can access. You can also save different files for later on, so you don't always have to come back to this website, which I think is really helpful. And also in textiles, we work with different materials and also indigenous materials, and so having this website as a resource to look back into when you encounter these materials is always a good thing.
Next up, the FIT has this great website for a fashion history timeline, but it is a very aesthetically pleasing and concise way of looking at fashion history. And they add stuff to it all the time. So it's a great way to just check in on certain areas or periods that you may not be super familiar with if you're researching something specifically. And they add, like I said, they add new stuff all the time. So it becomes more and more inclusive as they work on this website, which is great. We love that. A few more general references that we gathered and that we enjoy, well, I enjoy, is a little fashion dictionary by the Women's Wear Daily, which I think that they have good contemporary and historic resources anyway. I think Women's Wear Daily is a good place to check in on. But, you know, if you're not super familiar with certain terminology or certain names of certain garments, this is a really nice little spot to start. And maybe some of this seems like, oh, I already know this, or I have no idea, I've never heard of this before. I have no idea what like a bishop sleeve is, or maybe you don't know what a bonnet is, all that good stuff. And a resource that I also really enjoy is this page from the dress and textile specialists. In particular, things like identifying handmade lace and identifying textile types and weaves. These are really specific and really detailed, especially when you get into something as difficult as lace that just has a million different things that can be associated with it.
So the next group of resources we want to share with you is housing and storage. And if you are new to textile conservation, housing and storage is a really important aspect of textile conservation because it can keep the textile from further degradation. It can also help keep its form and then also help with handling if the textile is fragile. And I think that the resources that we have will hopefully give you a good idea of what sources to access when you have questions about storing textiles or costumes and accessories. And so my first one I want to highlight is the MFA Boston. So this is basically an initiative that they started to kind of share the different ways they store their own costume and accessories. And I think this is a really helpful resource to access as an emerging professional or a current grad student. So they have an explanation of their projects and their goals. And then after that, you have the different lists of storage. You have a different list of materials and objects that they come up with storage solution for. So if you go to fans and hand screens, they have 3 different mounts that for a specific type of fan or the specific position that you want them to be stored in. And they have really helpful diagrams. And I think this is a really good approach if you're looking for a solution for certain storage problems. And then in addition to that, they also have their materials and suppliers. And I think this is a really good and way to organize a housing and storage resource because you're not always going to have the supplies on hand, and so having these links will also help you when you're working with storage and housing solutions. And then the next one is Stash. So this is our storage techniques for art and science and history webpage. So this is a more broad resource for storage and housing, but I really enjoy Stash because they have, as you can see, an abundance of storage solution, and these are posted by working conservators or conservators in the past, and they give you really good insight into like how people are coming up with solutions for different objects, different materials, and then also with like the space that they have to work with as opposed to having a dedicated storage space. What if you have to make storage for interactive museums and things like that? So I think this is a really good resource to have. So let's see how, like, one of these is hanging rolled textiles on underutilized spaces, and you can see they have the purpose, also the contact, and you can reach out to conservators if you have any questions. And it's very detailed and it's basically like a recipe to build housing and storage, which I really enjoy because as long as you follow this, nothing can go wrong. So as conservators, we have the Cameo, which is a wiki page developed by the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, and they have a lot of resources that I found really helpful. One of them being the fiber reference image library. So as for textile conservation, fiber identification is really important in understanding the object that we're working with, and sometimes not all institutions or where you're working would have a reference set, and having an online reference sets to access, I think, is really going to help in the long run. And not only do they have different types of fibers, from animal to manufactured to plants, they have samples from different museums, so you can see, and different objects, so you can see what an ise miyake black polyester looks like versus something that is from a 19th century gold satin ball gown. So I feel like this range of fiber references is really helpful for people who are working in like a wider collection where you may have older materials as well as more contemporary materials.
Continuing with materials, we have this guide on natural dyes, which is really great when working with older materials that only use natural dyes, or if you are working to conserve something and you need to color match something with a natural dye. This is a very nice little concise visual PDF to help you do so, or to help you understand how these certain things are used historically. So we have things like indigo, logwood, and how to use it. It's nice, it's concise, and a good supplementary material when you're doing conservation. So next up, we want to look at some hand sewing sources, in particular needles and stitching techniques. So there are lots of different kinds of sewing needles, and as textile conservators, we work with our hands a lot, we work with needles a lot. So it's good to see exactly what all these different needles are and what they're used for. And next up, we have a directory of hand stitches used in textile conservation, and there are a lot of different hand stitches. So it is so great to be able to have this guide in particular because it's really visual. It's a compendium, really. It's really thorough in what it's teaching you on this website. And then we also have the RSN Stitch Bank, which is also sort of like a hand stitch thing, but also it talks more about specialty stitches or stitches that we'd see maybe in embroidery or samplers. This is good for when you run into stitches that you don't see or use in your everyday practice. And then lastly, we work with our hands a lot as conservators. And when you're sewing all day, 7 hours a day, it's good to stretch before, during, and take care of your hands because they are your most important tools. So I really like this PDF because it's really short, sweet, concise, has pictures, and you can just bang some of these stretches out in the middle of a project just to help keep your, hands healthy. We hope that you found these sources useful. Maybe you've seen some that you've never seen before and you want to check them out. We will have them provided in the description below so that you can just access the links below the video. There will be a supplementary PDF PowerPoint along with this. And we want to thank you for listening, and please reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to know more about one of these sources or about the ECPN.